Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. This one is a pretty exciting one. We're going to be looking at the Maw of Souls. This is basically the Vrykul Hell dungeon. Now, this was done as a part of the Legion Dungeon race. That is an event which has already aired at this point, in which we went against a team of Americans in a time trial. So on our team, there was me, Fat Boss, Kelric, Trekkie. We had an absolute blast just even doing the preparation for all this. Great fun. Now, this dungeon specifically is really quite cool. It's a short dungeon, about 3 bosses, and you could probably see it as being a little bit closer to, say, Grimrail Depot, and you'll see why in a little bit. So first of all, let's talk about some of this trash. This was actually surprising. We had a death. The main thing that you see here is an ability called Fracture, and in addition to that, they also do a frontal cone. You'll see me dodge fractures from time to time. The trash itself was tuned such that it was definitely a bit of a stressful healing moment for Loz, we'll put it that way. Now, this is on normal difficulty, and there are more mechanics going on the heroic difficulty. So we're coming up to the first boss here, which is a reanimated King Yemen, who you would have recognized from Utgard Keep. And yeah, overall, so we're just dealing with this trash here. You can see they're doing a few different abilities. There's a frontal cone involved. There's Fracture. Now, that was putting a dot on people, which was actually taking extremely hard from what I hear. And now, before we get into the first boss, I just want to talk about my overall impressions of this. This is one of the most graphically impressive dungeons I've ever played. Not right now, but you'll see why once we get onto the boat. The boat is extremely cool. As are the bosses. They need a little bit more work. I believe we are the first people outside of Blizzard who actually played this dungeon, so that was a little bit of an honor and very cool to see, but also it is very early on in its in its progress, and considering how early on it is, very, very fun dungeon. I really did enjoy it. It's also quite a fast dungeon. This video is clipped down to be, 13 minutes long? It wasn't much longer when it came to our actual time. That could be a good thing for some people, a bad thing for others, but certainly it's a dungeon you can run into and probably clear quite quickly. On to King Yemen. He does a few different things, but he's actually a very simple boss, and in fact, we saw just about the entire fight within the first few seconds. What he just did there is Screams of the Dead. It does 120k damage and it fears players within 12 yards for 5 seconds, so when he's doing that, you just want to run out a little bit. This is Winds of Northrend. He bashes enemies for 100k damage and he knocks them back. My health pool was like, 1.2 million, so not much of an issue. He also does Screams of the Dead. That's going on right now. Sorry, Bane, even. The boss is surrounded by these little swirly things. Now, those swirly things do 300k damage to the player if you run into them, and 35k damage to everyone if you run into them, so don't run into them. Now, a little bit of a concern is if you get Winds of Northrend, and that knocks you into the swirls from Bane. And then he has Dark Slash, that is his tank mechanic. It's an active mitigation thing. Thankfully, we had Trekkie there, and I believe he knows how to tank somewhat, so things like that were not a massive issue. Overall, it was quite a simple boss, but I think he's got a solid mechanical toolkit. He does 1 or 2 things more in heroic, which is kind of interesting. Overall, though, it was quite easy, and it was a little bit, I'm not going to say undertuned, but certainly I think Screams of the Dead and Winds of Northrend should do more damage. Also, you can see my pro disengage there. Yeah, really whipping out the good gameplay. Still, it's definitely a fun boss, and you will see harder bosses, just harder trash in general, actually, later on in this video. So after he's dead, anytime a player clicks on that big horn, that will transport you onto the boat. So you basically wake up in the boat, like, captured in these cages. So then everybody breaks out of their cage, and you have some trash to deal with. These regular Cavaldier guys, honestly, were not a big problem. We just ripped our way through them, and they were pretty darn easy. However, there's definitely fun times ahead when it comes to what's going on in this boat. Now, we were using, Binding Shot, Capacitor Totem, things like that to try to decrease the damage that we were taking. We were definitely, we were tryharding it, right? Which obviously in a race is what you want to do. So our experience going through here might be different to what's going to be going on with a regular group that isn't doing a race. Here you can see some guys that were pulled. I actually was pretty sure that I pulled them and then FD'd. I'm not 100% sure though. We've got these ghostly guys as well. So running in here, you'll see a whole bunch of these little dogs. Now, the dogs themselves are not much of a problem. The problem is when there's loads of dogs and you didn't really know they were coming. That's what happens very much momentarily. You can see at the very top there, we've got this big, he's not a colossus, like a flesh golem guy. So what this flesh golem does is a frontal kind of cone attack, and then like a little AoE. There's a blob on the floor there. Pretty standard stuff. There's his main attack. So he's not really much of an issue. We thought that was fine. We'll just stand, stay put. But look at the amount of damage that's being done by people to people by this boss. And then you can see the little action bar, health bar, nameplate thingies of those patrolling dogs, which I'm 99% sure we end up pulling. And overall, this led to a tricky situation with the amount of damage that we were taking. You can also see this guy, he's basically a mini-boss, actually. He is taking up kind of room on the floor, meaning we've got less space to play in. And now things are getting a little bit tricky. I'm pretty sure Laws dies soon. I was sort of getting chomped on by a dog. Bit of a tricky situation. Apparently the Blizzard guys thought we were a bit boned here, but, well, we ended up surviving. So I managed to get my way through that. I actually found that, this is actually a cause of death in the previous dungeon, that health pots weren't working. So that led to me dying, which is a little bit of a pity. But anyway, some pretty good trash. We then finally move on to these two guys. I'm pretty sure they are the last trash before we get to the next boss. So the interior of the boat is really cool. One slight concern that I've seen is, is there going to be a motion sickness problem? The motion that's going on isn't crazy. You actually can't really tell when you're inside the boat. You can more tell when you're on the top deck of it, because it is a boat swaying in the ocean. From a motion sickness perspective, though, I think most people are going to be fine. Anyway, let's move on to the first boss. But first of all, though, just drink in this scene. Like, wow, it's really impressive looking. He does a few different abilities. Not a massive threat, honestly. So that thing that you just saw there was Cosmic Scythe. A large line of scythes appears. It does 200k damage to players standing in it. He just made an ad spawn. Now, those ads do Void Snap. This will deal damage to all players in a line, and it is interruptible. However, I found that it was very easy to kill. Now, he just did Fragment on me, so that fragments your soul into pieces. Each piece does shadow damage for 30 seconds until it's killed. So just kill it. Fragment also stuns you for a few seconds. And that is pretty much the fight. He is a very, very, very simple boss, if I'm honest, which is maybe a little bit of a pity. I think, he should be maybe doing his Cosmic Scythes a little bit more. One of the weaker bosses, but he's pretty fun. They definitely need to tune a few of his abilities up a little bit higher, I think, because we just found that a lot of them weren't really that much of a danger. Now, the final boss, we definitely found that she was a danger. She was, she didn't kill anyone, but the amount of damage that was sort of being taken by everybody was very, there was a solid amount of damage consistently coming in, which is quite tricky. Also, the Syndragosa, Breath of Syndragosa is kind of ridiculous looking because the animation's a bit broken, so she just sort of hovers through. Now, looking at the rest of this, the actual scene, the top of this boat is extremely cool looking. You've kind of got the swaying ocean, all these tornadoes and things going on. I don't know if it's a tornado or a hurricane. There's, if they made landfall or not, whatever. I think it's done in a similar way to how Grimrail Depot is done. So essentially what I've gathered is that the boat itself is completely static, and then the environment around it is tilting. I'm going to assume from my experience of doing some graphical things that it's kind of like a sphere map, that they're wiggling around the place. That seems to be what they're doing. It's a very cool effect, and they've really managed to pull it off in a very cheap way. And when I say cheap, I mean, hardware resources cheap, not cheap as in bad. So after that, we move on to some more, packs of trash as we make our way towards the end of the boat. Now, most of this is kind of forgettable, kind of skippable, just regular trash, not that interesting, but I thought I would include it here just so you can sort of appreciate the boat, because the boat's really cool. I mean, after this run, we probably spent a good 20 minutes just taking screenshots and thumbnails and videos, because, we're all content creators, so it's kind of useful stuff to have in our bank. Now, this trash is pretty much fine. The only thing which would kill you is if you kind of messed up and pulled loads of stuff. We had a good tank and a good healer, so we were able to pull, a little bit more aggressively and make sure we didn't die. But I could definitely see, say, a hunter doing barrage here as being a potential worrisome issue that could cause a lot of problems for you. Anyway, the main goal here is just to clear out these mobs, and there is a NPC at the very end of the boat there. He pretty much serves as a mini-boss before we get to the final boss, and the third and final boss. It's a very, very short instance, so he does a few different abilities. He does a strike there. Honestly, they're not particularly scary. He's very much easy to kill. Really, once he's down, we move on to the final boss herself. Great, so we've just cut to after we killed that mini-boss, and now we're moving to the end of the boat where we're going to face off against the final boss. And the reason why I've sort of showed the entire thing here is because it's a pretty cool sequence. Now, it's definitely not 100% perfect, and this boss itself isn't 100% perfect. It's definitely got some issues, but from a sheer impressiveness factor, it's, well, impressive is certainly the word. So, first of all, a very big boss, and it starts off by her spawning all of these tentacles. She also starts blasting you back against the end of the end of the room. So there's these Destructor Tentacles. And now the abilities here are a little bit strange, but let's just first cover the Destructor Tentacles. They slash around and do damage. If nobody has them in melee, they will damage all players. A very standard mechanic. We then have the tentacles which spawn around the sides of the boat, like the one I'm attacking right now. Attacking those will decrease the boss's health once they die, and that's pretty much what's going on with the tentacles. Now, there are also tentacles that will pop up through the floor and cause a hole in the floor. If you fall into that hole, you take about 250k damage from your 1.2 million health pool, so that's really not something you want to be doing. And that's mainly what this phase of the fight is about. You just need to kill the tentacles and not get hit by stuff. The damage is pretty light, it's pretty manageable. I'm pretty sure that I think on Heroic there's an additional ability where waves come in from the side of the boat, but that's not really active in normal mode. Here's a Destructor Tentacle that spawned right behind me, so immediately we had to get Trekkie over there to start tanking it because it starts doing its smash, which would attack or hurt everybody, which would probably have led to a wipe. And that's mainly what's going on for this phase. It's more hectic when you're there, and it was more hectic for us because we didn't really know what to expect even after watching the dungeon journal. Let's cover her abilities though. So first of all, you're seeing loads of these droplets appear. That just happens throughout the fight. You take some damage if you stand in them, so don't stand in them. She has an ability called, let's start off with Taint of the Sea. This debuffs a target, which causes them to take 60,000 damage per second. By the way, yeah, the boat's getting wrecked right now. This was very surprising for us. I just fell into that hole that appeared. Like, this was really hectic. Like, our VoIP was just full of people going, what the balls is happening here? Anyway, Taint of the Sea. So, debuffs a target, causing them to take 60,000 damage per second. When it's dispelled, it does 60k damage to all players when it when it expires or is dispelled. It doesn't seem to do much damage when it's dispelled. Maybe they'll have to shore up that mechanic a little bit. We initially thought we would, whoever is affected by that would have to run out of the group, call for a dispel, and go back in, but that didn't really appear to be the case. We've got the piercing tentacles. They're the ones that are piercing the hull of the ship. They knock you back. After 3 seconds, they deal 400 to 500k damage to players within 8 yards. You'll see them pop up from time to time. Now, there's a difference between those and the ones that just pop up and then disappear again, which is a little bit strange. Some things didn't appear to be 100% active in this fight. Anyway, there's also Torrent, which does 40k damage to several players. I think that's responsible for a little bit of just the constant damage that we're taking. And then there's Wing Buffet, which damages all players if nobody is in melee range of the boss. The first thing you're really going to notice here, though, is this is crazy. I mean, there is stuff going on all over the place in this boss fight. There are ground effects. There's the tentacles flying up everywhere. There's a limited toolkit that the boss herself is doing there. She just did Torrent, and that just did a little bit of damage to everyone. And I've actually got Taint of the Sea on me right now, which takes down it's doing a solid enough amount of damage, I suppose, but it's not a massive concern. Though I'm pretty sure Laws was getting it was getting low on mana when it came to doing heals. We can't actually check. There's a bug right now where you can't see monk mana, and there you go, she's dead. Pretty darn fun, honestly. So that's basically a look at this entire instance. It's short, it's sweet, it's pretty action-packed. I had a lot of fun when I did it. It's definitely got a lot more of a initial impressiveness than, say, well, basically any of the other dungeons. This is one where they've really thrown kind of their entire toolkit into making it look cool. I think mechanically some of the bosses are not up to the par of Halls of Valor Heroic, or maybe Halls of Valor Normal, depending on the tuning. But very solid dungeon. I had a lot of fun, and I hope you enjoy this video, because I think from a visual perspective, it's just extremely cool. But anyway, guys, that's pretty much it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time.